Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, former New York Times labor reporter and author of his latest Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor, Stephen Greenhouse, will be with us. Meanwhile, in a stunning decision, a North Carolina Superior Court strikes down gerrymandering and Republicans give up the ghost. In Texas, another Texas Republican House member to retire. Well into double digits now, folks. And in England, something's going on.
They are about to vote on passing a ban on a no-deal Brexit. They will know in 15 minutes. And then the Queen, if she sends a signal 3 hours from
Right.
then.
And apparently Boris Johnson's wearing a 3-button sport coat. Then he gets to be...
yeah, exactly. He gets to be Secretary of the Duchy.
And then they roll a big ball of cheese down the hill.
And then everyone has tea.
Meanwhile, on the eve of the CNN Climate Town Halls, Elizabeth Warren adopts Jay Inslee's climate goals. Bahamas in ruins as 60,000 of the 400,000 who live on that island are without water or food. Dorian now, not quite the storm it was, but still big, heading to the Carolinas. Hong Kong leader withdraws the extradition bill that sparked protest, but protesters are continuing as they've only gotten one of 5 of their demands. And apparently, the military doesn't need all that money. They just gave Donald Trump $3.6 billion for his wall. And lastly, apparently conversion therapy works if you're trying to convert back. If you're trying to go 360, as the one of the biggest conversion therapy proponents in the country comes out and concedes that he is in fact gay. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen.
The business.
Oh gosh, and then we got great news. This program will not be distributed by the Blaze. Because we are not a conservative program. And there are only conservative programs on the Blaze network. Like Steven Crowder. This is also the network that launched, they merged with the thing that launched Gavin McInnes. And of course, Tomi Lahren, although she got booted because she was pro-choice, if I'm not mistaken.
Because of small government.
And they have a bunch of other conservatives on there, like, that new guy they have, that conservative, Dave Rubin. Right. So congratulations to Dave Rubin. Dave, I don't want to take anything away from you because I know that you've worked hard for this. And obviously you I would imagine through the various Coke affiliate networks, word got out that David Koch may not have too much longer to spread horridness.
Competition would start kicking in
through cash gifts, and maybe you heard it was time for you to move to get a little more aggressive with the book coming out. I just want to say that you deserve most of this credit. But I also got to say that I think you're deciding to just come out as a conservative, and watch out for that Steven Crowder there, because he loves to make fun of the gays. But you're coming out as a conservative. I feel like in some small way, I helped you. And I want you to know that makes me feel good. So congrats to you. And if I do say so myself, congrats to me. Because I feel like, I helped you in some way see your true essence. And there's nothing that makes us happier here. I think we all basically participate, obviously, in helping.
We support true essence.
There's nothing that is more gratifying to all of us here than to see someone come into their own like you have. So
it was supposed to be after 2020.
Kudos.
My whole timeline was sped up.
Well, that's good. I mean, good for you. And you know what that means? You guys will sell a ton of books.
Especially some large purchases, I imagine.
Yeah, and there may be some big purchases.
Do you have those bulk purchasing deals?
But that's pretty good.
Seems to me that abortion, I've thought about it intellectually, and it's wrong.
Right.
Do you have a bulk purchasing deal?
Oh, that was the other thing, is that, Dave, would you mind sending me a heads up on when you're going to announce that you're fully now anti-abortion? Because you've been pretending a little bit like you've been walking down this road. I would imagine these negotiations have been going on for a while. That may have been the big stumbling block, or maybe you and Glenn worked out like...
We're not sure, actually, that the bulk purchase is going to work. Ooh, it seems to me like women should be able to choose
this whole post-birth abortion thing is really problematic. I just can't support people who support killing live people. So, no. I mean, except for unless it's,
unless the book thing's not
unless they're
coming through.
Palestinian. Okay, but...
and they could be aborted when they're adults, too.
This is about the ideas. I thought, how can I organize ideas? And I need a giant chalkboard with Ilhan Omar right in the middle of it, and Glenn's got one of those.
Well, as I said last night, he needs a boss. He definitely needs direction. And whatever else you say about Glenn Beck, I think he's able to provide a form of direction.
Yep. Hey, folks, as you know, in fact, my daughter is starting school tomorrow, high school.
Congrats.
It is a time of great anxiety for kids, and they're concerned about their appearance, whatnot. I mean, look, adults are too. But you don't, things like acne are problematic. And one of our sponsors, America's #1 acne brand, Proactiv, has helped fight acne for almost 25 years. And they've introduced their next generation acne treatment called Proactiv Md. Apparently, it contains dalpolene, which, according to I still consider him my father-in-law-ish, who's a dermatologist. That is the one of the most recommended, topical, what do they call it? Retinoid treatment for mild and moderate acne. And apparently this is the first prescription strength retinoid that is FDA approved for use in treating acne without a prescription. And it works by affecting the growth of cells, decreasing the acne inflammation. They have been at this for about 25 years. Old Kelly, not old, but formerly Kelly. Well, not formerly Kelly, but Kelly, formerly of the show, tells me that she's been using Proactiv on and off since high school. The formula has improved over the years. The ideas remain the same. It is a program of skincare that gives you short and long-term results. It's the best acne fighting product that doesn't require a prescription. It's been that way for a long time. She writes, I have sensitive skin, and Proactiv's program has made my skin smoother and clearer without causing redness or peeling. And this is the perfect time of the year to start a program for many people because school is starting up soon. It only takes weeks to achieve a noticeable difference in your skin, and confidence makes all the difference. It's the best regimen I've ever used. And right now, we have a back-to-school offer from Proactiv. You can't get anywhere else. With your Proactiv MD order, you're also going to receive Proactiv's on-the-go bag, which features their T-Zone oil absorber, body acne wipes, and green tea moisturizer for free. That's close to $100 value. Plus, get free shipping with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just go to proactiv.com/majority. That's Proactiv, PROACTIV.com/majority to order and make the first day school back to school the best day ever. So check that out. Before we get to Stephen Greenhouse, this is a really important story. We'll get to Mike Pence and his evasiveness later in the program, but this is really important. As you know, the Supreme Court rejected even the idea that the Supreme Court could address partisan gerrymandering. And they did this back in June in the, I think it's Rucho versus Common Cause. Essentially, John Roberts said federal courts can't decide gerrymandering cases because they're beyond the competence of federal courts. Now, this is pretty stunning. They said that state courts are competent to do this, but somehow federal courts are not.
That's why I'm snickering in the back row here. Like, oh, even the more potentially biased court, they can do it.
Right. I mean, this is
implicated by statewide partisan elections.
Exactly. However, a superior court, this is a state court in Wake County, North Carolina, heard a case, Common Cause versus Lewis, and they had, you remember the Hoffeller files, right? This is the guy who is considered the grandfather of gerrymandering. He died. His estranged daughter went to go collect his stuff, found all these hard drives, which was huge in the context of the citizenship question that came up in the census, because it became clear that he was the one who promoted the asking of that question, who wrote the alibi for the Department of Justice and for the Commerce Department to use in getting that question on the in the census, and the Supreme Court struck that down. Well, what was also in there, in this treasure trove of hard drives, was all of the correspondence and evidence that the North Carolina Republican Party had specifically set out to essentially make it impossible for Democrats to control the state house, to develop a gerrymander so that Democrats could win the majority of votes in the state, and still the Republicans would win a supermajority of the seats. That's how dramatic this was. The court issued something like a 370-page decision because there was so much data. So these seats were drawn in 2017 because the Supreme Court had struck down the earlier version as a racial gerrymander, which they apparently are competent in viewing. So Republican legislators gave Hoffeller all the election data, said, we want our supermajority, figure it out. So he created all these, we've heard how this is done, right? You pack all the Democrats into one district, even if you have to draw it on a house by house basis. And then you create more like 55-45 Republican districts. Apparently at the trial, experts looked at the maps and said that Hoffeller's maps were more favorable to Republicans than 99.99% of maps that were generated by an algorithm using nonpartisan redistricting factors.
He was good at his job.
Yeah, he was very good. So apparently the Wake County Superior Court found, which consisted of 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, found that the extreme gerrymander violates 3 provisions of the North Carolina Constitution. This is where you can get some remedy if there is a state constitution that deals with voting and you have more Democrats than Republicans sitting on the state Supreme Courts and state courts. One, it strikes at the heart of the Free Elections Clause. This is a broad reading, but it said that the clause found that elections must be conducted freely and honestly to ascertain fairly, truthfully, the will of the people. If a majority of people vote for Democrats and Republicans still win a supermajority of seats, you could argue that this is not a free election. Second, the court held that the gerrymandering violates North Carolina's Equal Protection Clause. That seems quite obvious. My vote as a Democrat is worth not even like 2/3 of the vote of a Republican because of the way the gerrymander works. And they also violate the guarantees of freedom of speech and assembly. Voting for the candidates of one choice and associating with the political parties of one choice are core means of political expression. To diminish people's votes based upon what party they belong to is an attack on that free expression. It burdens their speech by making their votes less effective. The court gave the General Assembly 2 weeks to draw new legislative maps. They're not going to the Supreme Court, and I will give you 6 reasons why. Because 6 Democrats, 1 Republican on that state Supreme Court. So there you have it. This is going to have a dramatic impact on North Carolina. Maybe not, well, certainly in this election, but in the years to follow, it's going to create North Carolina is going to be a reliably blue state in 10 years. Right. Reliably. I mean, it's purplish now. It's going to be reliable. I mean, it's just the way that it's going, and they're not going to be able to stop it. So good for that court. Courts are important, folks. State courts, federal courts, which means that the people who appoint people to courts, the people who set up the voting and have control of the voting apparatus in states where they vote for people on courts, this is all very important. Not sexy, not policy, but it's about power. And this dovetails nicely into the question of unions in particular, not so much labor, but the power of unions largely is statutory. And we will talk to Stephen Greenhouse about his book, Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor after we take this break. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome the former New York Times labor reporter, author of his most recent Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor, Stephen Greenhouse. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here, Sam.
So, I just by chance today, there was a piece in Axios. Unions shrink fast in swing states. In particular, the percentage of U.S. workers, union members fell from 20% in 83 to 10.5% in 2018. Brookings gives a half a dozen reasons for the decline. I suspect that you would order them differently than Brookings did. They were saying it's a manufacturing to service-based economy, more people getting college degrees, the rise of tech, deregulation, and then it goes to spread of right-to-work legislation and aggressive employers who have used things like tactics delaying union elections. Your book gives a history both of sort of the rise, the fall, and then I guess maybe the hopes of the union movement and in this country and the power of labor. And in fact, you say specifically American labor in the title of your book. Let's just start with this notion of like the difference between labor and unions, and at what point unions became the I guess the tool for labor to empower themselves.
So sometimes, labor is used interchangeably with unions. But in American history, we remember the Industrial Revolution, late 1800s, where workers faced huge oppression, sweatshops in the garment industry, people in, mechanical industries, losing arms and legs, horrible exploitation of people who built the railroads. And, things are pretty bad for a lot of industrial workers in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Then 1929, the horrible, Great Depression hit. And things got even worse. A quarter of the workforce was laid off. Many people lost their homes. So during the New Deal, FDR, they said, we need to figure out a way to pep up the economy, to put more money in workers' pockets, and that might rev up the economy if workers have more money to spend. So they passed a law called the National Labor Relations Act that created a federally protected right for workers to unionize. And FDR and the great senator from New York City, Robert F. Wagner Sr., thought that if we made it easier for workers to unionize, they'll be able to get higher pay, to get a higher share of the profits of their companies, and they'll be able to spend more on cars and washing machines and clothing for their kids, and that will create a virtuous cycle that will help lift the nation out of depression. And unions grew very fast in the late 1930s and were very strong during World War II. And in World War II, there was this wonderful partnership generally between business and labor, because they realized they were fighting a common enemy, the Nazis, the Axis powers. So unions were really strong in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. And in my book, I write about, how labor unions very much helped create the American middle class. The middle class really didn't exist before the 1950s. And it was some landmark union contracts, especially ones won by Walter Reuther, probably the greatest labor leader of the 20th century. He headed the United Auto Workers. Right. He reached this, amazing contract that lifted workers after inflation pay by 20% over 5 years, that created great pensions, that created great health coverage. And that really, put labor on the map in a big, big way in the United States.
Okay. And you dedicate a chapter to Reuther, and I want to talk about that, but let's go back. So we have the Francis Perkins comes in and as FDR's Secretary of Labor. And if I'm not mistaken, she, sort of witnessed what had happened at the Shirtwaist Fire in some fashion or another. And she is less a union organizer type, but sees the importance of law as empowering unions, right? And you mentioned this ultimately culminates in the Labor Relations Act, but talk a little bit about like what happens with Taft-Hartley, which in many ways kneecaps unions, right? But they just don't feel it for, it seems like, 2 decades.
Okay, before I talk about it, let me put add some context and framing. So I wrote this book, partly because, workers in America are really taking on the chin in many, many ways. Yes, unemployment is low and wages are finally creeping up. But, we're the only industrial nation that doesn't guarantee all workers, paid parental leave, paid maternity leave. We're the only industrial nation that doesn't guarantee workers paid vacation. In the European Union's 28 nations, all workers are guaranteed 4 weeks paid vacation. We in South Korea are the only two industrial nations that don't guarantee all workers paid sick days. And, one of the main points I'm making in my book is that the U.S. suffers from this horrible anti-worker exceptionalism, and that's partly because worker power is so weak in the United States compared to other industrial nations. And in the book, I examine the rise of worker power and union power in the U.S. and how that really lifted workers from the sweatshop stage to being members of a prosperous middle class. And, and I discuss certain important chapters in that, like Walter Reuther and how Francis Perkins, the great labor secretary under FDR, helped. And then I discuss, the decline of labor, through globalization and massive corporate fights against unions, and Taft-Hartley. So, as I said a few minutes ago, Sam, so unions grew very strong, from the late 1930s into the 1940s after the National Labor Relations Act was passed. And Francis Perkins, Roosevelt's labor secretary, played a real role in helping that get enacted. And after that was passed, we went from maybe 7, 8, 9, 10% of workers in America were in unions to by 1954, 35% were in unions. So, after World War, so unions and business, as I said, worked very closely together during World War II to defeat the Nazis, to produce all these, warplanes and bombs. But, there were wage freezes throughout World War II, and after World War II, union members, were very impatient for raises. And so there was a record number of strikes in 1946. Steel strikes, railroad strikes, auto strikes, and they drove the public crazy. And that helped, and as a result, that helped elect a Republican Congress. Republicans were in control of Congress for the first time since, 1932. And they, the Republicans, of course, don't love unions, and they pushed very quickly to enact a very tough anti-union law called the Taft-Hartley Act. And that, gave employers a right to fight against unionization efforts. It enabled individual states to enact so-called, anti-union fee laws that are often called right-to-work laws that said, that with these laws, states can say that workers at unionized workplaces don't have to pay any dues or fees to the unions that represent them, that bargain for them, that win raises for them. And these right-to-work laws have really helped weaken unions in many, many states. Now, turning to your very first point, so about union membership declining in the key Midwestern states, I make a big point about this in my book, and I see it's been picked up elsewhere. I say that, one of the main reasons that Donald Trump was able to win in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania was that union membership had greatly declined there. And I think, we talk about, horrible things like voter suppression, and that certainly existed in Michigan and Wisconsin, but I think far too little attention has been paid to how the decline in union membership has hurt the Democratic Party, had hurt, Hillary Clinton. Hillary, I argue, did not do nearly enough to win over blue-collar voters. But I think also, the Republicans really pummeled unions in Wisconsin with Scott Walker and the law that really crippled government sector unions in Wisconsin. And the Republicans in Wisconsin really wanted to eviscerate, gut public sector unions because they saw them as friends of the Democrats. And, that law far and away was the main reason that union membership dropped in Wisconsin. And I write in my book that union membership dropped in Wisconsin by over 150,000, by 43% in the past decade, by over 150,000. And Trump won Wisconsin by just 22,000 votes. So you can imagine if those additional 150,000 people were still in unions and unions were beating the bushes and getting them to vote for Hillary, vote Democratic, Trump might not have won Wisconsin. Ditto in Michigan. Union membership in Michigan fell about 140,000 in the past decade. Trump won Michigan by just 11,000. And again, Republicans worked very hard in Michigan to enact laws to weaken unions. There was a right to work law and another law that kind of cut the knees off the unions representing child care workers and home care workers. They really cut back in membership and cut back in paying dues. So I probably would argue somewhat with the Brookings Brookings study. Certainly the loss of manufacturing jobs played a big role, but certainly in Wisconsin and Michigan, the Republican offensive to hobble cripple unions played a big role in the decline of union membership.
Right. I mean, the manufacturing can have, but there are other jobs that people are going to that could be unionized if there wasn't such a hostile statutory climate toward unionization. I mean, let's talk a little bit about this notion, because that's, as far as I can tell, the law that Walker rolled out in 2011 it was, right at the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
That sparked all those protests was essentially, one of those model laws that was developed in something like the American Legislative Exchange Council, and that Wisconsin was basically, the pilot program for this on some level in states that had, Wisconsin had an incredibly rich and, one of the richest union histories in the country. Let me ask you this, because, I remember talking to Grover Norquist just by chance, and it wasn't something I would recommend to people to do often, but in the early aughts, and he was talking about public sector unions then as being problematic, getting pensions while other people's pensions go away, that type of thing. And so this was clearly one of their agendas. And in modern times, I look at the card check legislation as the analog, except for when Democrats got into power, they completely forgot about it.
So, Grover Norquist, many people don't like it. He's a very smart guy, and he's a very good strategist. And I quote him numerous times in my book where he lays out why it would be good for Republicans and good for people like him who hate taxes to try to cripple unions. And, for the Grover Norquist of the world, it's great to try to, gut public sector unions, because what do public sector unions do? They push for good salaries for teachers and police officers and firefighters to make sure that the salaries are adequate, that, good, trained, talented, dedicated people will move to those jobs. But Grover doesn't like that because it might mean higher taxes. Another thing a lot of public sector unions do is they push for an adequate social safety net. They want to protect Social Security. They want to make sure, that there's, for teachers, want to make sure there's adequate food for kids in school. They want to make sure food stamps are adequate. They want to make sure that, child lunch programs are adequate. And again, Grover Norquist and a lot of, conservatives, want to, silence and gut and weaken public sector unions because they're champions of an adequate social safety net and Social Security for tens of millions of Americans. So, Grover Norquist, the Koch brothers, lots of other billionaires were really cheerleaders and contributing money to Scott Walker for him to lead the way in this experiment of, chopping off public sector unions at the knees. And Iowa in 2017, without much fanfare, without much attention, passed a law, just as powerful in chopping off public sector unions at the knees. And these laws really very much weaken public sector unions, and that hurts the Newark Democrats because public sector unions, knock on doors and make phone calls and help elect, and very much help elect Democrats. And, I use a line in my book that, Grover Norquist is famous for saying he wishes he could shrink government to the point where, it would go down the bathroom drain. And I said he probably feels the same way about labor unions. He wishes that labor unions would, become so small that they would also go down a bathtub drain. And, there's been this long war, one of the main points of my book is there's this long war both by corporate America and by, working hand in hand with the Republican Party to weaken unions, especially government sector unions. And there's a line in my book, Sam, that has really been picked up where I say, in no other industrial nation do corporations fight so hard to beat back, indeed, quash unions. And, I have a very upbeat first third of the book about the rise of the unions and how they, ended sweatshops and improved, mining safety and catapulted millions of workers into the middle class. Then I have a somewhat depressing, second third of the book. I think it's important to explain, why unions have grown weaker. And part is globalization and offshoring of jobs. But a lot of it, I say, is that corporate America fights extremely, extremely hard to kill unions, to beat back unions, and that's really hurt the nation. The percentage of workers in unions, has dropped from like more than 1 in 3 in the 1950s to around 1 in 10 now, and just 1 in 16 in private sector jobs. And I argue in the book that is one of the main reasons we have had decades of wage stagnation. That's one of the main reasons we've had so much income inequality, and that's one of the main reasons our government is so screwed up that, it rushes to enact, $1 trillion in tax cuts for corporations when corporations already have record profits and the stock market is already at record levels, when it, when the Republican Congress did nothing and Mitch McConnell's Senate continues to do nothing to raise the federal minimum wage, which hasn't been raised in a decade, the longest time it's ever gone without it being increased.
So, Stephen, we also have examples of the corporate, I guess, resent of labor power. I just interviewed some folks last week about the auto industry and their determination to weaken labor, which meant that they changed essentially their entire supply lines. They dispersed themselves around the country. They changed the way that they did on-demand production so that labor had less ability to shut down their supply lines, and labor had less ability to shut down their production, broadly speaking, and it ended up destroying the innovation and the quality of American cars, frankly. So the destruction of labor has, or the assault on labor's power, it seems to me, has all the effects that you mentioned and more that are negative. But here's my question: like you frame it in the context of corporate America and the Republicans basically started waging a war on labor via unions. But it also seems to me, and at different times it sort of presents itself in a different way. But we saw it starting in the 70s when, that maybe came out of the desire to reform the primary process for the Democratic primaries. There seemed to be also a sort of a failure of Democrats to engage in this war. And like I say, that goes all the way up to the failure of Democrats to provide when it comes to card check, which was basically allowing people to unionize in a much easier fashion rather than sort of like putting a target on their backs for anti-union activities when, there was any inkling that people wanted to unionize. Is there any way for unions and for labor to revitalize itself? I mean, we've witnessed some of this.
Yeah, I devote the last third of my book to various models and strategies and recommendations for how to revive worker power in America. I say worker power, unfortunately, has fallen to its lowest level in decades, and here are some models to increase it, like the Red Flag teacher strikes have really been amazing. They've achieved a lot, and they've really excited people about labor. I just want to go back to the auto industry for a second. So the United States is like the only country in the world where, all these companies say, well, we're going to escape the unionized area in the north and move to the anti-union area in the south. And one of the hypocritical things is all these corporations in America say, well, if we're unionized, we're going to become uncompetitive. It will, render us uncompetitive against Mercedes-Benz, Daimler-Benz, against BMW, against Volkswagen, against Toyota, against Honda. Daimler-Benz, VW, BMW, they're all unionized in Germany. Honda, Toyota, they're all unionized in Japan. So, those companies do very, very well, even though they're unionized. And in the United States, I was a reporter for the New York Times in Europe for 5 years. I was their European economics correspondent. And I wrote a lot of stories about Germany and Spain and Italy and France and Scandinavia and Britain. And companies there, they work, they realize, they work hand in hand with unions. They realize they might not like unions, but they realize that unions are legitimate institutions and they're partners they need to work with. In the United States, there's this real, among many, many corporations, there's this real hatred, enmity towards unions. They don't see unions as legitimate very often. They see unions as something to stomp on and wipe out. So where do we go from here? How do we rebuild unions, reestablish worker power? One of the interesting things about this Democratic campaign, Sam, is far more than I've ever seen. The candidates are talking about, we need unions, we need to rebuild union power, we need to reverse labor's decline. And I think part of that is that, with all these candidates, they're all trying to attract unions to get an edge up, And also they saw how the weakening of unions in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, some in Ohio, caused the Democrats to lose theirs. So they realized it's important to rebuild unions. So, Bernie Sanders came out with this, vast, expansive, platform to expand unions. Beto and Buttigieg also came out with pro-union plans. Elizabeth Warren has a great plan on how to improve trade deals. So there's a lot of attention to unions and workers. And I think some of these candidates realize that one of the reasons the Democrats lost in 2016 was that Hillary Clinton, the standard bearer, did not pay enough attention to workers, especially blue-collar workers. And Donald Trump, who I believe is, a great con man and demagogue, went to Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and said, I'm your blue-collar guy. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to bring back all the jobs. I'm going to stop plant closings. And that was total BS. But a lot of people believed it. A lot of people were attracted to him. And I even interviewed some workers in the Midwest who said, you know what? I know this guy doesn't tell the truth. I know he's not going to do everything he's promised. But at least Donald Trump is showing that he cares about workers. And I like that. And I think the Democrats see that they have to try harder to, attract blue-collar workers. And you're absolutely right, Sam, that, starting in the 80s, 90s, the Democrats started turning their backs on blue-collar workers, and increasingly many people say became the party of the professional class, of lawyers, of software engineers, of Wall Street, of liberal Wall Street folks, of Hollywood celebrities. And, the Democrats, I think have too much forgotten that, that it's important to bring blue-collar workers with you, not just blue-collar whites, but blue-collar African Americans, blue-collar Hispanics, and blue-collar Asian Americans. That, the New Deal coalition, was very important for the Democrats' success. I think the Democrats have, made a mistake in not trying to keep that coalition together. So how do we?
It sounds like, but it's a political one too. But it seems to me that there's a legislative one. Part of the reason why, it's true. I think that Hillary Clinton ignored, parts of the industrial Midwest, but the reality is that she could go and campaign all she wants to these people. It's not going to increase union density. Union density is only going to increase, it seems to me, by two different ways. And they need to go hand in hand. It seems to me. One is there needs to be a statutory framework that makes it easier to unionize and protects people's rights. And then the other, it seems to me, there also needs to be some reform on the part of union leadership. And I say this sort of like with a broad brush, that I feel like we're seeing more of that in the context of teachers. But this notion, talk just for a little bit about this idea of of managerial unionism versus social justice unionism.
Sure, absolutely. So in the last chapter of the book, I really do a lot of what you're suggesting, Sam. I have recommendations on how to make it easier to unionize, and that, companies break the law all the time, fire pro-union workers to stop unionization. And they can't, under federal law, they can't even be fined. They just have this tiny slap on the wrist. Often when they're found to have broken the law, all they have to do is put a little notice on the bulletin board, say, we broke the law, we promise not to do it again. So I say you need real fines with real teeth so corporations don't break the law. And I say there should also be card check. What is card check? And, often, when folks try to unionize, there's a secret ballot election. And if more than, if a majority of workers vote for a union, then the company has to recognize the union. But during the secret ballot election, there's a campaign that takes 3 or 4 months. And companies, it's not a level playing field. Companies have 24/7 access to the workers. They show anti-union videos in the lunchroom and the break room. They require workers to attend these hour-long sessions with these anti-union consultants who tell them that unions are evil and corrupt and all they want is their money and they don't accomplish much. And unions, there's a Supreme Court decision that says companies have a right to even ban union organizers from setting foot on company property. So the advantage of card check is that, union organizers, once they get a majority of workers to sign cards saying we want a union, that would make it much easier for workers to unionize without all this, all this firing, all these illegal activities. So I outlined that, it would be great if Congress would enact some laws making it easier to unionize. However, and I make this point very, very strongly in the book that, there's been, President Johnson, President Carter, President Clinton, President Obama, 4 Democratic presidents all tried enacting legislation to make it easier to unionize. And every time they were unable to overcome Republican filibuster in Congress. So it's very, very hard to enact pro-union legislation unless Democrats have at least 60 votes. And I say that,
or vote on day one if they have 51 votes to get rid of the filibuster.
Well, that's a whole other issue,
right?
But I say we need to fix our campaign finance system. It's totally broken, and as a result, our campaign finance system usually favors corporation and the rich, and usually tilts against disfavors workers. And, I cite these statistics and it blows people's minds. I cite these in my book. In the 2015-16 national election cycle, corporations gave $3.4 billion in political donations, and unions gave just 213, less than 1/16 as much as corporations. So that's why Congress rushes to pass tax breaks for corporations. There's nothing on minimum wage. In lobbying each year, corporations spend just under $3 billion a year on lobbying in Washington, while unions spend less than 1/60th of that, just $48 million a year. So things are really broken in the campaign finance system and lobbying. And I argue that if we're to have a government, a system that's fair to workers and doesn't favor corporations so much, we need more public finance. We need some system, campaign finance system that levels the playing field so that, the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson don't have a million times the voice of a Walmart worker or a New York City school teacher or a truck driver or a steel worker. I mean, the system is really, really broken and really favors the rich and corporations.
So, Stephen, lastly... Okay, well...
On your point about... Go on.
No, go ahead. Finish your point.
So on your point, and I also say, I totally agree with you, Sam, that union leaders, too often, just see running a union as a business. We'll handle this grievance if a worker is punished for coming in late. And they've lost the passion of unions. Too many union leaders have lost the passion of union leaders of the 1930s and 40s that, we were a movement. We're trying to lift millions of workers. Unions are part of fighting for social justice. Unions led the way. Unions played a very big role in the civil rights struggle. People don't realize that the main person setting up the great 1963 March on Washington was a union leader, A. Philip Randolph, head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. And I have a chapter about the Memphis sanitation workers strike in 1968, which was really a very difficult struggle, but a landmark victory for civil rights and labor rights. Unfortunately, it was at a terrible cost. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated when he was in Memphis backing his sanitation workers. But I argue that union leaders need to fight more for social justice, fight more to make clear that we're about lifting standards for millions of workers instead of just having a myopic vision that we're just to settle this grievance and try to get a 1.2% raise rather than a 1.1% raise.
So, lastly, let me ask you this: as a former labor reporter, give me your take on the demise of labor reporting in this country. It seems to me that as unions have gone, and those covering union news and labor news has shrunk even more.
So I covered labor and workplace matters for the New York Times for 19 years. And, I remember when I began covering labor in 1995, I went to an AFL-CIO convention, their annual convention in Miami. And there were labor reporters from the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Chicago Tribune, the St. Louis Globe-Dispatch, Baltimore Sun, and several other papers. There were like 25 labor reporters. And in my last year at the New York Times, 2014, I went to the annual AFL-CIO convention in Houston, and I and someone for the Houston Chronicle were the only two people, daily newspaper reporters covering it. And for a while, I'm sad to say, I was the last full-time labor reporter at a daily newspaper. And so there are many reasons for this, Sam. One of it was that, in the aughts, newspapers really got zapped by the internet. They lost a ton of advertising. They laid off a ton of reporters. And often the labor reporters were among the first to go because labor reporting, writing about unions isn't seen as sexy as writing about Beyonce or writing about the New York Yankees or the Boston Celtics or LeBron James. And I think some publishers and editors were uneasy about covering labor. They didn't love unions. So there was a real decline in labor reporting, certainly going into 2008, 2009, 2010. Then I've seen, though, somewhat of a rebirth of labor reporting. I know that surprises people. I think part of that was caused by the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. A lot of newspapers that were ignoring workers, ignoring labor, all of a sudden saw that unemployment had boomed, that a lot of workers were having a huge problem making ends meet. And so all these people, the economic reporters started writing about worker issue and labor issues. And then we've seen the rise of all these websites, Slate and Vox and Vice and Huffington Post, and a lot of them tilt somewhat to the left. And they realize that, a lot of their readers want to read about labor issues. So Huffington Post has a very good labor reporter. Vox has a very good labor reporter. And so in ways, a lot of these websites, the daily newspapers don't have as many people covering labor, but a lot of the websites now have people covering labor. And they do a pretty good job, but you have to know where to look. And the big problem is, like, on television, on radio, there's very, very little about labor and about workers. There isn't nearly enough. So, I wrote this op-ed for the New York Times a few weeks ago saying, we are the only industrial nation that doesn't have, paid vacation, doesn't have paid maternity leave. We are only one of two industrial nations that don't have paid sick leave. People don't know this. They think, right, and America is great, we're the greatest, and they don't know enough. And I think in schools, kids don't learn enough about, what labor unions have accomplished and how workers in America in many ways have it worse than in other nations. And one of the main purposes of my book is to explain to people who want to know more about labor, who don't know much about labor, about the state of workers today and how unions have really improved things for workers over the years and the challenges facing unions and how we could rebuild worker power through things like the Fight for 15 and the teacher strikes and these efforts to unionize Uber workers and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers.
Well, Stephen Greenhouse, the book is Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and the Future of American Labor. We're going to put a link to that book at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Great to be here. Keep up the great work, Sam.
Bye-bye. There you go. Great history of, some of the major figures in labor, as well as a sad history of its demise. Important to understand. Very important to understand in terms of, imagining what we can do in the future. And also to understand the importance of having a genuinely committed Democratic Party, or at least elements of the Democratic Party, a critical mass of the Democratic Party, dedicated to providing, because what we're seeing in terms of unions across the country, or at least in terms of labor, is very encouraging. All the strikes that we saw with teachers in Nevada, they were threatening to strike. They got a pay raise. We still have 40 some odd days out. Kentucky miners blocking a truck. I mean, people are understanding that they have some power. But you need to maintain that power long term. You need institutional support. We give that support to corporations as a government. As a society, we give it to them all the time. We give it to them in form of tax breaks. And you shouldn't think of them as tax breaks. It's much easier to understand why they're such a benefit when you think of it as we give them services in kind. We give them free services, discounted services. We all pay for the services that we get. They get a discount. And they pass those savings on to themselves. We allow them removal from their liability. They can be at arm's length. Wells Fargo, for instance. Megan McArdle wrote a universe, what is it? What do you call that? What is it? Not universe brain, galaxy brain.
No, it was universe brain.
Let's just say universe brain.
Yeah, universe brain piece on how it was just a coincidence that those 5,000 Wells Fargo's workers were all breaking the law. And it was really just because there was an overly ambitious executives.
They took the easy way out.
That's right. This was, Wells Fargo cannot be held responsible for them saying to their workers, be ambitious, here are some goals, and then they're having 5,000 of their workers just be lacking the character that it takes.
It's like Carlo Gambino goes, I think there's a lot of opportunity at the docks. He doesn't control whether or not someone sets up a protection ring.
Exactly.
That's exactly the same thing.
Exactly. We have no responsibility to make sure that we have any controls that would prevent 5,000 of our workers from putting people into accounts that they don't own. We can't be expected. I can't be
expected to be held responsible for every single motivational speech I give my employees.
I mean, but the reason why those Wells Fargo executives are not in jail is because there are liability protections that are built into corporations. There are accountability protections that are built into corporations. There are all sorts of benefits that our society provides for corporations, both in terms of their existence. Oh, you want to buy back your stocks? Okay, we're going to allow that now. We're going to allow you to juice the own value of your own company to manipulate your stock. That'll get you more money. That'll get you more power. Corporations do not exist in nature. They do not. Every single corporation in this country has a document There are articles of incorporation that have been filed with the state or with the federal government. And that's why they exist. So we provide certain benefits for corporations. And we should be doing this for unions because at the end of the day, to the extent that you can't have a free contract, but you can have a fair contract. And that fair contract means that both parties have to come in there and there cannot be the type of asymmetry, particularly from a statutory standpoint, that inhibits one's ability to bargain with the other. And we have seen, I keep citing this interview with one of the authors of Wrecked. We've seen the lengths that U.S. corporations will go to debilitate labor's power, even if it means cutting off their own nose to spite their face. Or whatever it is, whatever that saying is. I don't even understand what that means. Cutting off your own nose to spite your face. It hurts when you cut your nose, too. But the point being, I just have never been able to quite figure that one out. But the bottom line is, the U.S. car industry destroyed itself because they wanted to inhibit labor's power. And frankly, there's no one, when you think about the people who will pay the price for that decision, there is no GM. GM is just a protection to certain individuals who are at the top, who certainly, they weren't hurt by the fact that GM doesn't make the same quality cars it did 40 years ago. Same with Chrysler. Same with Ford. They're not hurt by it. They still make off like bandits. The people who are hurt by it are the communities and the workers and the American consumer. I mean, that's the dynamic that we have. That's why we need statutory reform. In addition, I mean, first thing we need is agitation and labor to understand its own power. But then they need to use that power to get politicians to provide the institutional support so that that power is sustainable and can grow more. And with that said, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, ladies and gentlemen, wherein we will have fun half. Also, you can support this program by becoming a member. Go to jointhemajority.report.com. A lot of people emailed me. I just joined to hear that Hannity interview in the deep archive from last week. What day was that, Brendan, that you put that on?
I think Monday.
And then what else? Rick Hertzberg? Who else?
No, Hertzberg was Monday. I think Hannity might have been Thursday.
Yeah, Matt ended up doing the DJing on it. Yeah, pretty good. It's a good 1-2
What
punch
else?
there.
What else did you have?
Bright Eyes was there.
Oh, I remember when
music.
Connor
Oberst.
Yeah, he came into studio.
Yeah.
That was pretty nuts. I mean, it was nuts because I had no idea who he was at the time. Like, I was like,
really?
Oh, are you? Oh, here's just another one of some famous Eddie Vedder. I just found a mini DV tape. We must have videotaped it when Eddie Vedder came in to the studio. Gary Hart, and we had
Hi Eddie.
Get
out of my way, Gary Hart.
I met so many famous people during that time. It was crazy.
Get out of my way, Eddie. I want to meet
Also
Gary
at
Hart.
Yola Tango.
Yeah, that was the other
Yola
music one.
You're really into Yola Tango. That's a big deal for you.
It was a big deal for me. They also they did my wedding.
Right.
I mean, I'm friends with those guys. But they came in and played. Also, They Might Be Giants played in studio.
Nice.
And Cowboy Junkies.
Oh, cool.
That was, anyways.
And then I picked part of the Rick Hertzberg one was Larry Elder and Katrina.
Oh, that was at the
Vanden
convention.
Heuvel. Yeah, that was at the convention.
That was at the Democratic convention. And Hertzberg and I talked about Barack Obama. His speech, he had just given his speech that basically everybody was like, wait a second, this guy could be president. Anyways, that's available to our members, the Deep Archive stuff. And maybe what we'll start doing is maybe putting out maybe once a week a Deep Archive pick for members. That might be a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So head to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Steve Greenhouse mentioned that Scott Walker law that attacked unions. There were massive protests back in 2011, and the Just Coffee people were out there giving people free coffee because they're a co-op and they're good people. So check that out. Also, check out our AM Quickie. We're about to migrate it to its own feed in the coming weeks, so check it out. And lastly, don't forget, America's #1 brand, Proactiv, has helped fight acne for over 25 years. And they now have their next generation acne treatment system called Proactiv Md. It is got the dermatologist recommended #1 retinoid, which is used in treating mild and moderate acne. And, you know, it's tough. You lead with your face. And it's tough if you're feeling self-conscious about it. But if you order now, you will receive Proactiv's on-the-go bag, which features their T-Zone oil absorber, body acne wipes, and green tea moisturizer for free. That's close to a $100 value. Plus, you get free shipping with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just go to proactiv.com/majority. That's Proactiv, proactiv.com/majority. Last night, I think yesterday I said tomorrow's Tuesday.
Oh, you did?
Because I forgot that yesterday was Tuesday.
I didn't notice.
But last night
was Tuesday.
Definitely Tuesday. What happened here in the studio?
Partay. No. We had a great show. Crystal Ball joined us. We talked about, when you look at the polling numbers, why is it that the overly affluent, overly educated white is...
We love the overly educated.
We love the overly educated. Actually, we do. We really do.
Even the dumb ones.
Why is the professional class lining up behind Elizabeth Warren? And what does that mean about the election and the nature of her candidacy? The strikes in Kentucky, and it's a 1% chance, but even if it's one, you should take it. What is the actual way of possibly, in that 1% scenario, beating Mitch McConnell? And Artesia Balthorpe was here. We talked about Jay-Z, the NFL, the Newark water crisis. I mean, I don't know if people know, there's really a water crisis in Newark that is quite parallel to Flint. And we're going to be seeing more of these across the country.
It's weird how this keeps happening.
It's weird how this keeps happening, both obviously on racial and class lines, and also the fact that a lot of these pipes were built in the New Deal. Yeah. And they haven't been upgraded. And this is about the time they go out of commission. Then we had a post-game dealing with Uruguay, Brexit, a whole bunch of stuff. Patreon.com/TMBS to get the whole thing. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. For patrons today, a message went out with your passcode to get your tickets to the TMBS live show November 23rd in Philadelphia with special guests Crystal Ball and Emma Vigeland. Come see us.
Jamie's out, but check out The Antifada, patreon.com/The Antifada. Matt.
Yeah, it's going to be a good literary hangover. Part 2 of The Pioneers by James Fenimore Cooper on Saturday.
Quick break. Fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-5014. 57 238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
oh my God, we got to pull that video. Welcome back, folks. It is the fun half of the program, and I was derelict in my duties as host in terms of picking up the phones, getting onto the phone lines. I will work my way there, but I am going to open up the IMs. We did not have any IMs yesterday. Maybe we will just do IMs today. Maybe we should do that once in a while. We'll do just an IM day. I don't know. You know, we do 3 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day, and it never feels like it's enough. I mean, maybe it does to other people, but to me, I always feel like...
Interesting that we just had a conversation on labor.
You guys are just hanging out anyways.
I'm bringing my bong in here if we go any longer.
We'll
Writing
go to the
that into
IM.
the bylaws.
What? Thames Darwin, Sam, I don't know what the hell's going on over there, but my download of the Hannity interview from last week doesn't actually have the interview. Instead, it's a repeat of the Art Spiegelman piece from earlier in the week. I'm not going to name names, but I suspect water boats are involved in the screw-up. Right after Matt had just talked about bringing a bong in here. Shape up, guys, or I'll stop using my friend's login info to download your show for free.
If that's a general thing, we'll just re-upload the interview. That's weird.
Yeah, let's do that. Water boat from Kashmir. There's so much happening in Kashmir, I don't know what to say. But it's much closer to Bosnia than the West Bank at the moment. The only thing worse is most of the Indian media, which is actively running cover for fascists now. The Indian government is totally hampering foreign press, while Kashmiri journalists are not allowed to file stories who've started to disappear. The BBC South Asia bureau chief said yesterday that reporting from Kashmir is the worst he's seen in her lifetime. And she's reported from Syria, Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. The most alarming part, Amit Shah, BJP's home minister and the actual architect of the Gujarat massacres, proudly chest-thumped last month, saying that they are unstoppable now because they can make and discredit news at will. The news is what they say it is. He actually said this.
Yes.
I'm at a loss for words. Oh, and the Gates Foundation awarding Modi. Yeah, what the?
Well, it's a Clean India initiative.
I just don't understand.
They don't care about this stuff, and they never have. And frankly, with Modi, it's the Gate Foundation. PR Amador has had a very close relationship with Modi. They don't care. And it goes back to not caring. I mean, you've known what this guy's about since 2002. The atrocities in Gujarat were so bad that this guy couldn't get a travel visa to come to the United States because there was a coalition of progressive Democrats and then Republicans because some Christians were massacred as well. They don't care.
It's just unbelievable to me. Nobody says like, "Hey, are we gonna get any type of PR blowback from this?" But I guess the point is like, well, we might, but we're giving away millions of dollars and billions of dollars. Like, who cares?
Who cares? Also, I mean, maybe blowback in some places.
That's why these sorts of decisions shouldn't be left to individuals who accrue all the capital from
Also,
an operating system.
Bad
Exactly.
and not good.
Gregory from Oklahoma. I got to see Cory Booker speak last week. It was interesting, but he didn't really talk about policy or anything he wanted to do. I stood close to the stage he was speaking at and got a picture with him. Cool stuff. Bullprog.
That sounds like the perfect summation of the entire Cory Booker campaign, actually. He didn't really talk about anything, but it was kind of a nice guy. Got a picture.
I can look for a video, but did you hear the thing where he compared himself to Malcolm X in New Jersey schools? I'll look for the quote.
Malcolm X. That's exactly what Malcolm X would have done. He would have tried to partner with hedge funds.
Malcolm
X was predicting Facebook. You didn't read him properly.
Bullprog, true story. I was at a Yola Tango concert and someone got kicked out for gently swaying too hard.
That wasn't good.
SMR to chemist. Cutting your nose to spite your face comes from the Viking raiders and nuns. The nuns would cut off their noses to prevent being raped. Oh, God. That's horrible. I don't quite get that. I'm not fully sure I quite get that either. I understand that. But so you actually are, the way that we use that phrase now is different. Yeah. Yellow Springs Taqueria owner, Killer Filler, said, seized by ICE deporting pending. See Butler County connection, aggressive Trump supporting county sheriff. Wow, that's horrible. One more IM, and then we'll get to some other stories. Brock from VA, 2019's been a wild year. First, Sam was talking about snuff films. Then he said he doesn't want to sound like a pederast. Get him away from libertarianism ASAP.
It's gearing up, man. He might run.
There you go.
I have spoken of snuff films several times on my show. No one else on this stage has done that.
There we go. I didn't realize.
You make an aggressive play for the libertarian vote.
The voicemails on. Oh, someone did not leave the voicemail on last night. Did you take calls?
I didn't take calls last night, buddy. Sorry.
Really?
So you left it on after the main show, buddy.
I guess that must have happened. Not good. Much better when you can blame other people.
Much better.
Much better. This was pretty. Let's just start with this NBC News thing. Just to get this out of the way. Say this in a way that it won't get demonetized. Let's say you had a societal problem. Let's just say that people were going around with whipped cream pies. And they were using them to fling at people. But let's say these were lethal pies. Well, you could say, hey, we're not going to sell these lethal pies anymore because they're lethal and they're being used to harm people. Or you could say, we're going to come up with a project that will diminish gravity or increase gravity and make pies harder to throw. Well, of course, in America, we're going to choose option B. Here is an NBC Nightly News report on the bold new plan to cut down on basically what do you call it? Like lines of fire in schools, sight lines.
So one of the ideas behind this curved hallway is to cut down on the line of sight of an active shooter, and then to further cut down the line of sight of an active shooter, we installed these wing walls, and it also provides a place for students to hide behind if there's a threat down at the other end of the hallway.
And this won't look like this eventually. There'll be furniture in here, right? This is a comfortable place.
Yes, this has been designed to be a learning corridor. This is a learning space, and so there'll be technology kiosks in places like this. Yeah. There'll be relaxed seating around, similar to a college commons area.
Are you trying to de-emphasize the security aspect?
Absolutely. When students come to school, I don't want them to have to worry about security. I want them to worry about learning.
Won't the probable shooter be inside one of these kiosks as well?
Well,
that was part of Dave Chappelle's new bit. He's like, every time you do trainings like this at school, the shooter's in the back of the room goes, and then where do we congregate at?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, this is what amazes me is that the reporter can just walk down the hall and be like, oh, right, okay, of course. And what about turrets? And are you going to have some...
That the reporter isn't like, am I in a simulation or is the world actually ending?
Right.
Is this actually happening? This
Hold
is the most
on
heartbreaking thing
Wait a
ever.
second. Is this Jerry Weintraub putting me on? The producer of my old show? Oh my God! Oh, it's my retirement party.
I mean, this is a joke, but it's also one step away from getting like the people who design first-person shooter levels like to be really hard for the first-person shooter to come in and say, "Oh yeah, this is what we do in Doom."
Can we
or
make
Metro
this a
Exodus.
level 15 difficulty?
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
Hire a
We've only got the
consultant.
budget for a level 12.
Yeah, but that'll be fine. There's a theme coming up. I've been digging into Civil War lately, and I am
Call
quite
me
convinced.
Jewish John Brown.
I am quite convinced that more and more that maybe the Union Army shouldn't have been so hesitant at the end.
There's not enough salt. There's not enough. We keep.
Look,
be ruining
if
their
you
crops
listen,
for generations.
if you listen, if you go back and you, I'm listening to a Yale professor's basically his year-long lecture on the Civil War, and he did this back in 2006 and 2007, which makes it even that much more poignant because the way they describe the Confederacy in terms of before they were actually the Confederacy. When they're talking about slavery and the way they get like all defensive, like we're the victims here. And this is about freedom, our free ability to maintain slaves against the sort of like, oh, you're so great, North. It sounds exactly like conservatives
You
today.
look down
and
on
here's
us.
the thing.
You look down on us.
Back in 2004 and 2005, Andrew Sullivan would talk about how George Bush is not conservative. That what's going on is not conservatism. It's not in the Burkean tradition, blah, 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 blah. And at the time, I remember saying, like, this guy is the conservatism he's talking about is like, it's like Latin. It exists. People talk, people use it in the academy or perhaps in chapels, but it doesn't exist in the real world anymore. It is a dead ideology. They use the name. It still exists, but it's not, whatever conservatism was, it's not that. What it is in the context of today is largely little bit of greed or significant amount of greed. I don't know if you were to actually measure it in terms of like being held by people, but it's a certain amount of greed. But it's also just ultimately race resentment on some level. And there's something in the water down there.
Call me Hebrew John Brown. I'll go.
I want to recommend, though, it's not an amazing movie, but I'm fascinated by the history of the Free State of Jones, which is a Matthew McConaughey movie, but it's real.
Oh, this guy mentioned that, I think.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It was about basically a soldier for the Confederacy who essentially is like, the class dimension of it. Like, I don't own any land even to begin with. I don't want to be cannon fodder for landowners here. And basically, they created a small, they called it the Free State of Jones. It was escaped slaves and Confederate soldiers that left the army and essentially just wanted to create like farming cooperatives. It was temporarily, I think, protected when there was a northern occupation. And then after that, a lot of the folks were murdered and so on. But there's this other history to it, which is fascinating.
One quick note on this study that came out earlier. Elite resiliency bolstered Southern aristocracy after the Civil War. Basically said they all recovered financially by 1880.
Right. But the reason why I raise this is because for some reason this talking point is now going around on the right. That if there is a move to reban assault rifles like the AR-15, and you'll recall they were banned from 98, I think it was, until 2004. 94 to 2004. In the wake of Ronald Reagan, I think, being shot. No one had assault rifles. But then the ban ended and they got pushed out the door. They're now one of the most popular things in the world because you pop, 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 pop. And you can not only can you shoot that deer, you can just keep shooting him and shooting him and shooting him until his face is totally blown off.
You can cook him with bullets.
Yep. And you can, like Ted Cruz, you can fry a piece of bacon on the end of it. So here is, who should we go with first? Let's go with Tucker Carlson. This guy's still around. Who was his guest? Michael Tracy? No, I don't think so. Here he is, Beto, obviously, Beto O'Rourke, dealing with now multiple mass shootings, murders in his state, one that was specifically from his hometown, has a heightened sensitivity to guns. And here's Tucker Carlson, who is really concerned about his ability to shoot deer, I guess.
We'll have to sell them to the government.
They will have to sell them to the government. Now, you will hear propagandists, and you often do hear propagandists, describe that as a gun buyback. But that's nonsense, of course. Americans didn't buy their guns from the government in the first place. They're not buying them back. This is gun confiscation. It's nothing but that. It's an attempt to eliminate a constitutional right that a ruling class finds inconvenient. It won't reduce gun violence. In fact, sending armed authorities door to door to seize people's lawfully owned weapons is itself a surefire recipe for causing violence. So if you cared about America and the people who live here, you would not suggest that.
Actually, you could suggest at the very least a voluntary gun buyback, and then one that is does not involve you going door to door to grab people's guns, but rather you say you have a certain amount of time to bring your gun in.
Yeah, or if we see you with it in public,
or if we see you, we're going to confiscate it. But here's the point. And first of all, I know all these elites out there. There's no elites at the top of these gun manufacturing. Those guys are just salt of the earth.
Yeah, Wayne LaPierre's spending habits in the NRA.
We are told that you don't want to take guns away from law-abiding citizens, right? These are good people. These are not the people you want to take guns from. But yet, we're also told in the same breath that if the authorities pass a law that says you've got to give up your gun, that what? They're going to shoot them now? These good people? Well, are they good law-abiding citizens or not? If they're law-abiding, they're going to give their guns up if that's the law. If they're not law-abiding, then they're criminals. And I thought the whole point was that only law-abiding people should have guns. Well, if the law is passed that there's a gun buyback, then guess what? You're not law-abiding if you don't sell your gun to the government. And of course, The View is back from vacation. View is back from vacation, and so I don't know if Meghan McCain spent her vacation practicing her self-pity, but she does pretty good here. Here is, of course, she's so tired of this topic. Why? It's like every time there are multiple mass shootings where people in the double digits die, we have to talk about it on The View.
Voting for Republicans, you're going to get nothing done. That's basically the bottom line.
When it comes to assault weapons?
Yes. Or any gun control.
I mean, look, the AR-15 is by far the most popular gun in America, by far. So if you're talking about, again, I was just in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. You're talking around going and taking people's guns away from them. There's going to be a lot of violence.
But they lived without them for many years during the ban.
I'm not living without guns. I mean,
but not all guns. What about living without the assault weapons that are killing our children?
All right.
But what about living without just that gun?
How about we live in a place? Virtue signaled at 20 minutes into the
How about we live in a place where we can actually walk in a mall and not look around and be nervous that someone's going to pull out a shotgun? Because that's where I was today.
Particular gun.
Well, I'm sorry, but none of you feel safe. I mean, again, like I feel safe that I can protect myself, and I have guns at my house. All right, welcome back.
I like virtue signaling. It's so, it's like, could there be anything more material than the idea of like, I don't want to be shot?
Why are you virtue signaling about children dying? Okay, whatever. I guess it's time for Joy to do her virtue signal about kids dying and whatnot.
Is Meghan McCain
I'm not living without a
if she
gun.
has children, she going to bring her guns to school to take her kids to
Maybe
school?
I'll take teleshots with them and shit with them. You know, my father's John McCain.
You know when the guy said...
He didn't virtue signal. That was my dad.
We know he belongs to the Lawyers Guild. And Mr. Cole nods his head at me. I did you, I think, no personal injury, Mr. Cole. No, sir. I meant to do you no personal injury. And if I did, I beg your pardon. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last? Have you left no sense of decency?
Why is he virtue signaling?
It's so virtue signaling.
Sorry, I thought that was a shorter.
That was a classic virtue signal when Joseph McCarthy was interrupted from having a drink and getting someone banned from writing screenplays by some sanctimonious leftist fruitcake saying, "Have you no decency?" in a classic act of virtue signaling.
That's all he needed to say.
The Salt March. Gandhi needs to walk and pick salt.
Do we have
virtue
a
signaling.
caller on the line? I can't tell. Kyle has got to fix this because I cannot see. I thought we had a caller on the line, and it does not appear that we do. Let's go to 863. 863, who's this?
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, who is this?
It's Jill from Lakeland.
Jill from Lakeland. What's on your mind, Jill?
First, I want to apologize. I called a couple weeks ago, and I told you about the Bernie bumper stickers and, a huge uptick in them, and it was hopeful. During that clip, I cussed, and I forgot in the moment about the demonetization.
Oh, don't worry about that.
That video, yeah, I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The other thing, I saw Jamie on Agitprop, and I just want to say she did a great job. I'm sorry she's not here today to actually hear that, but she did an awesome job.
We'll let her know.
And then the last part is, I'll try and be quick about it, but I'm kind of at an impasse. I wanted to talk about it last time I called, but I didn't want to take up too much time. I am lucky enough that I recently left my last job for a local business, and I'm trying to search for something I really want to do, and without naming what kind of, exactly who I'm putting applications in for, I'm kind of at an impasse where I could go in one direction for the private sector, working for a green company, something I feel very strongly about, or I could work for the public sector, in law enforcement, not as a sworn position, but as an administration. I just want to make a difference with what I'm doing. So if you had the same choice, what would you do?
I mean, gosh, I mean,
I want to affect change at a higher level.
Well, I need to know more details, but I mean, working for a company that is like developing green energy.
No, green is in plants.
Oh, are you talking about? Oh, I see. I see. Do you live in a place where marijuana is legal now?
Actually, medical marijuana passed the last election. I'm in Lakeland, so it's Florida. Okay. And then I think recreational is going to be on the next ballot in 2020. And so that is something I feel very strongly about. I've had a couple of relatives that I felt like if that was available
then work
to
for
them.
that company. I mean,
And
frankly,
so I just wanted to know. Which job do you think would do better for the world? Because I'm in a very lucky position to be able to choose where I'm going at the moment, and it's not about the money. It's just what I want to do.
I mean, I'm not sure that law enforcement is going to provide any progress for society. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to pursue, and if you were in a position where you could like reform it, but it doesn't sound like that's what the position is. It sounds it's more like administrative. Go provide medicine for people. That's pretty good.
And then the second point is I wanted to give a quick background. My family is very Southern kind of Democrat, so their belief is weird. And it's probably, if there's anybody from Florida, it's probably pretty common down here, like where they're socially kind of liberal, economically very liberal, but it's like it's mixed in with the old school conservatism in a weird way, and it's too long to explain here. But how that helped, like what that eventually was, I was more, growing up, I was more kind of like a conservative thinking person where I didn't believe in a woman's right to choose and all of those things because of where I was raised. And because of shows like yours, Majority Report, Secular Talk, Humanist Report, and TYT, over the last few years, it's really helped me flourish and be able to even spread it to my family some to become more progressive over time.
That's great.
Where I've got at least like 3 or 4 people in my family they're at least seriously considering Warren or Sanders as their primary vote. And I just want to thank you guys for being that force.
Well, thank you, Jill. You're getting other people to vote more progressive and to just start have a more of a progressive outlook is incredibly gratifying, and that's really why we do it. I appreciate the call, Jill. Good luck. Let us know.
Thanks,
keep us
Dan.
up.
Have a great day.
Keep us updated on what. And I think Matt would, if you need like a sample tester.
Oh yeah, please. I'll get a PO box set up.
Call from an 831 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh yeah. I'm there.
Is this me?
Yeah, it is you.
Oh, cool. Thanks for taking my call.
I
wanted to call.
What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hello?
What is your name and where are you calling from?
Oh, my name's B Cheesy. I'm calling from Sacramento.
B Cheesy, of course. What's on your mind, B Cheesy?
Yeah, your mother named you that.
So I wanted to just give a shout out to Michael. He made a couple of points a couple weeks ago that were, pretty important about gun control. I am a pretty pro-gun guy, but I'm not totally against all gun control. As I mentioned, I'm in California, so I'm just a little excited. But as I mentioned, I'm in California, so I'm in a state that's already passed all of the common sense gun control laws that people talk about. We have red flag laws. We have an assault weapons ban. We have all that stuff. So it's not really inhibiting my ability to exercise my rights. But Michael made a good point about gun control laws initially, when they first came around, were used to prevent minorities and other marginalized groups from owning guns at all. So, and that was also the start of gun control in California with the Black Panthers marching, and they passed the first open carry ban. So I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind, especially when you look at how gun control is applied in more restrictive states. White people are less likely to be tried and sent to jail for certain gun crimes than people of color.
Right.
So,
but that's
when we're looking towards this kind of stuff, I feel
that's right. I mean, and that's a criminal justice reform measure. But we also have to say that in open carry states, I would bet that you would find the incidence of black people being detained because they had a gun more often than white people. So, there's a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
The problem is greater than the question of gun control. And
that's 100% true. But my point was I mean, it was a twofold point though, because one part of it was that I actually, part of the reason I spend less time on this is because I think that there needs to be really aggressive action taken if you want to actually make a real dent in it. And I don't see anybody putting that type of thing on the table right now. But yes, it's part of a bigger problem, no doubt. It's part of an entirely racially biased criminal justice system. And as it stands now, these laws, especially when they're more kind of small, narrow targeted laws, are deployed in an incredibly racialized way. I mean, that stop and frisk, which was a major thing in New York City, was an anti-gun program, and it was used to
great
absolutely cause a huge amount of harm to Black and Hispanic community here. So yes, I think that does need to be a part of real analysis moving forward.
Appreciate the call.
And also one more point. I'm not opposed to gun control at all. And if you pass gun laws that also apply to cops, I will absolutely turn in all my guns to become illegal. But living in Sacramento, which is a very pro-gun part of California, there are a lot of restrictions that I, as just a regular citizen, have to abide by. I can't have a standard assault rifle. I can't have things like 30-round mags, 100-round mags.
Right. You can't own a bazooka.
Can. And just a few weeks ago, the cops were chasing somebody through my neighborhood, and he went into a building across the street from mine, and they were set up all around with AR-15s and AR-10s with 30 and 40-round mags, and all these weaponry that supposedly is a weapon of war that is on the street just because the police have it. So I feel like that's another piece that has to be thrown in there. And when you talk about gun control and you want to have an honest conversation,
well, I think
to convince people like me who are leftists.
No, I got you.
That's an extra point.
I got you. I mean, I think, and I appreciate the call. I mean, I think ultimately, the justification for police officers to carry those guns is diminished as there can't be, as they don't have the excuse of I'm not going out there when I'm going to meet guys with body armor and, assault rifles without more firepower. I mean, that's the problem with this stuff. All right, one more quick phone call for the time being. Calling from a 978 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
It is you.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hi, Sam. My name is Matt. I'm calling from Massachusetts.
Matt from Massachusetts.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, first off, abolish ICE. Second off, free Lula. And then third, go Pats.
Sweet.
That's a good call.
So far, you got the troika.
Good call.
Well, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, so recently I took kind of a hard pivot to the left. Now, so maybe within the past year, I've been sort of radicalized. But I've been a history buff my entire life, and a military history buff. And just something that I've kind of noticed about people on the left in general. Well, not even in general, but certain parts of like left groups is this aversion to this like very like strategy. Like people who are like, oh, I'm not going to participate in democracy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like, you know, and yep. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You were saying there's an aversion to strategy,
yeah.
which I think we would couldn't agree with you more.
Oh no, and you guys are fantastic on this, and I love listening to you guys. And you also, I think, have pulled off something unique, which is sort of like a coalition of like all the different types of left. I mean, you have, you know, your anarcho-communists, you have your democratic socialists, and then you got your more mainstream kind of like Democrats. But like, I've like saw people who are like, I'm not going to participate in bourgeois democracy because it's like just a tool, and it's like, but like a tool of like the upper class. But it's like it costs you nothing to participate in this democracy. And you have that tool, why would you just give that up for nothing? Do you know what I mean? And like it actually affects people on like a material level. It's like, why cede that ground when you don't have to? And like just on like a principled ground, it's like you could help people with this. You could like, you know, actually affect material things without like sacrificing your ideals, you know? And it just kind of makes me a little bit frustrated.
Yeah. Well, Matt, let me tell you this.
Get your guys' thoughts on that.
We've been doing this iteration of this version of the Majority Report for about 9 years, maybe 8 and a change, maybe 9, coming up on 9, I think. And I would say that you could, and if I want to say to someone, I need you to listen to all of this, the 9 years of the show, you could wipe away 3 years by just your summary of what is problematic with the strategy. Yeah. I mean, look, exactly. I think there is, I think, unfortunately, people conflate statements of ideology and expression with politics and dealing with power. And I think sometimes you say it cost them nothing. There is a psychological cost that's associated with it, which means that, you know, I mean, look, I don't know why people do that. You know, they leave means of achieving power on the table because they don't like the idea of having to touch anything on the table. And that's all well and good, but all you're doing then is just doing color commentary.
Counterpoint, you're both sellouts.
Right.
But Matt, appreciate the phone call.
Maybe you should ask for Tulsi Gabbard to be at the debate.
Yeah, my response to those types of comments is this.
You know, dude, I don't know if he's actually stuck around to hear the Ken and Ken show.
Hope he has. That gentleman should be involved.
Yeah. All right, let's get to, okay. Something's going on apparently in England right now. I think the deadline for a Brexit deal
October
is in October 31st.
And what they want to make sure is that he will not do a no-deal Brexit if they go to election.
Let me just explain to what a no-deal Brexit is in as sort of as basic terms as possible. It is basically England leaving the EU without any type of trade deal or arrangement as to what will happen. And
that is important.
You know, I don't know if the idea is that it gets us more leverage or less leverage, and by us I mean the British, or if it's like we're gonna go come hell or high water, and they need us more than we need them, or you know. But you need these structures. It's a problem. People are worried about it, and it's unclear to me what. I just don't understand it enough, to be honest with you, what Boris Johnson's strategy was. But he seems to have destroyed the Conservative Party for the most part. I don't know. but it remains to be seen. But they have a thing called the AMQ, right? This is the ask the PMQs, Prime Minister's questions, right? And I got AM on my mind, and they got the Prime Minister.
AM
AMQ.
Quickie, Mr. Prime Minister. I have a question. Hello. Hi. Do you hate the South, Mr. Prime Minister?
Anyways, the pre-MQ, and that's a lot of fun to see Boris Johnson being excoriated on the floor of Parliament. Let's start with this one. And it's not just in regards to, I think the idea is just that Boris Johnson's seen as weak now, and so that there may be a little bit more willingness to call him out. I know they do this all the time, but this seems to be pretty dramatic. This is a member of Parliament in the House of Commons, Tanmanjit Singh Desi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it
and
right.
He's from Hull, and he's Labour.
And he's a Labour guy from Hull. And here he is. For those who are, and this happens to Sikhs all around the world. And there was actually this week, I saw a video of, and I'm not sure, it was in Canada. And I don't know exactly what the context was. It seemed to be some type of event. And there was a Sikh lawmaker there who was being attacked by a Canadian guy as if the Sikh was Muslim and he was attacking Muslims. And the Sikh never, this lawmaker never said, "Hey, buddy, I'm a Sikh. I'm not a Muslim." He, which he certainly could have done, but he basically, sort of just defended, was very, protective of Muslim rights.
Two quick things. Yes, lawmaker and brother of Jagmeet Singh, who's the leader of the NDP.
So there you go.
Significant. And he's from Slough, not Hull. Apologies. Desi is from Slough, not Hull.
But here is Desi telling Boris Johnson to apologize for what's going on in this country.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Let's hear the answer. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. The response from the Prime Minister will be heard. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, can I just say to the honourable gentleman that if he took the trouble to read the article in question, he would see that it was a strong liberal defence, as he began his question by saying, of everybody's right to wear whatever they want in this country. And I speak as somebody who is not only proud to have Muslim ancestors, but to be related to Sikhs such as himself. And I'm also proud, Mr. Speaker, to say that under this government, we have the most diverse cabinet in the history of this country. And we truly reflect modern Britain.
Yeah, well, so he didn't apologize.
No, blah, 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 blah.
Here is another moment from the PMQ. Jeremy Corbyn is there talking about the danger of a no-deal Brexit, and that the Brexit negotiations have been basically a sham. Now, I'm not sure why Boris Johnson or the Conservatives want a no-deal Brexit. Maybe because it's just the safest thing for them politically. I'm not sure. I really don't understand the dynamics here. But here is Jeremy Corbyn.
I really fail to see how I can be accused of undermining negotiations, because no negotiations are taking place. He's been Prime Minister for 6 weeks and he promised to get Brexit sorted. In 6 weeks, he's presented nothing to change the previous Prime Minister's deal, which he twice voted against. These negotiations that he talks about are a sham. All he's doing is running down the clock. At the weekend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said food prices will go up under no deal. Will the Prime Minister publish the Yellowhammer documents so that people can see which food prices will go up and by how much?
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said absolutely no such thing. I can tell him the preparations for no deal, thanks to his good offices and thanks to his efforts, are very far advanced. But I tell you, the surest way
have it done in 2 weeks.
No deal is to undermine this country's ability to negotiate, which is what he is doing.
Well, I was listening to Glenn Beck on Dave Rubin's show yesterday, and apparently the conservative line on this is that Corbyn is undermining him because they want to look as if they really do want a no-deal Brexit, but they really don't want one. But
who wants to look like they do want?
Boris says they'll only give us something if they think we're crazy enough to do it. Glenn Beck specifically mentioned you want to look like a guy with a twitchy eye.
Oh, I see.
No, that's the whole
the madman theory of trade negotiations.
No, that's the whole joke.
We're going to blow ourselves up. It literally is it's literally one of those things where the madman is holding the gun. Is oh, you think I'm crazy? You think I'm crazy? How's this for crazy? And then shoots themselves in the head. I mean, the idea that they are staking out a bargaining position of no deal, what's the leverage? What's the leverage that England has that they want to be basically this lone island without any trade avenues or platform with all the countries that are within close proximity to them?
Well, that was the amazing thing, is that they actually had the best deal imaginable because they weren't on the euro.
Right.
So they had all of the advantages without any of the disadvantages of not being able to set their own monetary policy. So it was just not very bright.
Not good.
Not good. Very bright.
All right. Lastly, we have one more clip from the PMQ. Here is
would the Prime Minister agree? Hello?
Labour MP Vernon Coker gets up and basically hands it to Boris Johnson et al.
Prime Minister yesterday booted out 21 MPs from his own party for voting against a reckless no-deal Brexit. These included very well-respected members of this House, including a former Chancellor, including Churchill's grandson, and the father of the House, presumably on the orders of his Chief of Staff. Given that the Prime Minister himself voted against the former Prime Minister's deal without losing the whip, does this not show and demonstrate to the British public his view of life. Namely, one rule for him and one rule for everyone else.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take any lectures from anybody in the Labour Party about how they run their party. Look, this is a party where MPs, good, hard-working MPs, are daily hounded out by anti-Semitic mobs. Let's be absolutely clear. If the Right Honourable Gentleman is actually interested in democracy, if he's interested in democracy, then I hope he's been listening to what I've been saying today. In an anti-democratic way, the bill before the House today would hand over this country's right to decide how long to remain in the EU, and it would hand it over to the EU itself. That's what that bill involves. If he thinks that's a good idea, then let him submit it to the judgment of the British people in an election.
I mean, this canard of anti-Semitism is the way that it's been wielded. Oh, Republicans are doing it too. I mean, to a large extent in this country too. I mean, I think there has been some singularity that has been created in terms of the right in the world, and there we see it in Johnson. We don't know what his fate, or I mean, I wouldn't even, I can't even begin to guess what's going on over there. Frankly, I can barely tell what's going on over here. Here is Mike Pence. He's in Ireland. I'm not sure what the agenda is there. It's basically for him to maybe show that he's, stately, and in the event that something happens to the president, he's definitely got the bona fides to step in. He is staying at a Trump resort while he's there, of course.
Oh, is he? I didn't know.
Oh, gosh. And now, look, do I know if Trump wants that $1 million, probably a couple $1 million that gets paid to that resort for all the people staying there and take over? Maybe it's, I don't know, $5-10 million. Who knows how much it is? 2? I don't know. Donald Trump, it's reported that his Doral golf club is doing horribly because Donald Trump is odious, and it's hard for people to ignore that. And so they stay away from his places unless they want something from our government, which is, I hope people understand that that's a problematic dynamic. So Mike Pence is staying at the Trump resort or whatever it is while he's in Ireland, of course. Trump is double dipping here, getting that paid for that, and hoping, I imagine, that this helps from a marketing perspective.
Right.
So good for the press. I think this is Costas, Robert Costas. I think. I can just tell from the voice. I think. But I'm not 100% sure about this. Who is asking Mike Pence a question about the propriety of doing something like this, staying at a resort owned by the president.
Thanks, sir. Just to give you a chance to respond, Democrats have criticized you today for staying at the Trump property in Doonbeg. They say you're enriching the president. What's your response to that criticism?
It's wonderful to be back in Ireland. For many reasons. Ireland is so important to the United States of America as a trading partner. But in so many ways, for more than 30 million Americans, Ireland is family. And I'm one of them. I mean, it's deeply humbling for me to be able to come back to Ireland and have the opportunity to go to the very hometown of my mother's grandmother. I mean, we'll have dinner tonight at a little pub that I worked at when I was 22 years old, when I came over here shortly after my grandfather passed away. And right across the street is the house where my great-grandmother grew up. She often spoke of the castle that was out the window of her bedroom. And to be able to be here, to be able to reaffirm our commitment to the Republic of Ireland, to all of our economic ties, our diplomatic ties, but at the same time to have an opportunity to connect to the roots of my family, I think supports the relationship between the United States and Ireland. I mean, if you think about the bonds that exist between the Irish people and the American people, they have much to do with shared heritage, they have much to do with family. And that's why it was important for me, before our original trip plan, to at least spend one night in Doonbeg. And I understand political attacks by Democrats, but if you have a chance to get to Doonbeg, you'll find it's a fairly small place. And the opportunity to stay at Trump National in Doonbeg to accommodate the unique footprint that comes with our security detail and other personnel made it logical. We checked it with the State Department. They approved us staying there. And I was pleased to have the opportunity to return to that family hometown.
All right, Mike, shut up.
And to be able to stay there, and not just on a personal level, but also to do it in a way that helps me celebrate with the people of Ireland.
Yeah, a lot of gay guys who ate
So many
potatoes.
tens of
That's your
millions
family.
of
No one
Americans
cares.
feel to the Emerald Isle.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Whoa! That music hit it perfectly.
Wow.
You know, like he paused at first, and then he just went into that, and then you could almost see behind his eyes, like, I can't believe I figured this out. I can't believe I'm going to get away with this. And Mike Pence, I mean, yes, he may be a little bit dim. He may be an incompetent executive based upon his time as governor, where he was really loathed by 60% of the population, I think, in that state.
It sounded like his political career was coming to an end.
His
at least in, like,
political
Jim
career
Myers,
was,
like,
yeah. Yep. And, but this guy can lie. Like, you know, like I would put him up with any type of pathological liar.
That's the thing about Mike.
But I will say, and the only thing that isn't making him a pathological liar, I think, is just that he has a real concerted purpose when he lies. But he can lie. Boy, that guy can really just sit there with a straight face and deliver those lines. That is quite a talent, and all his God and all our gods and our non-gods help us if he ever gets into a position where he could be president, for God's sakes.
What's he going to do, stay in Limerick?
There you go. I wanted to go there for one night. Good job. Just stay for one night, Mike, because we can bill you for 7.
We could bill for 6.
And don't eat at that stupid pub every night. Come have a steak on us.
Right. I don't watch this show, to be honest with you, very often. I think maybe I've caught it once, not for any particular reason. Hassan Minhaj's show on, what is it called, Patriot Act.
Yep, on Netflix.
On Netflix. I just don't watch that much TV, but this was a great exchange that he had with Justin Trudeau. I would imagine probably the last exchange he'll ever have with Justin Trudeau. And I think, at any given point when you do these type of shows, you sort of make an assessment like, okay, this is about as high as I'm going to get in terms of like interviewing somebody. So this is where I'll make my stand. And of course, right now, the UN has said that the U.S. has been complicit, perhaps, in war crimes in Yemen. Saudi Arabia just killed 100 people the other day in a bombing run, according to the Red Cross. What's happening in Yemen is a disgrace. And the Senate tried to stop it. Donald Trump overrode the veto. Vetoed it. They could not override the veto. So maybe things would be better in a place like Canada, where you have a reasonable prime minister.
No, he's really woke.
Finish the sentence. Tim Hortons is
a Canadian institution.
Nice. Finish the sentence. Kawhi Leonard should.
should be very proud of what he accomplished in his time in Canada.
I completely disagree. Kawhi Leonard should never return to Canada because he is a traitor. That's the correct answer.
You know, people bring American sentiments onto Canadian politeness every now and then.
Finish this sentence. Canada will not sell any more weapons to Saudi Arabia, period. I'm sorry, I missed that one. Canada will not sell any more weapons to Saudi Arabia, please.
That's a good statement.
You said 9 months ago you guys would be examining it, and it takes about 3 months to study for the LSAT, so that's a pretty good examination time. You could announce it right here, right now. We're canceling the deal.
We got it
right here, wild on camera.
We take our legal responsibilities and the breaking of contracts very seriously in this country.
I'm telling you, they watch the show. Like, they really watch the show.
I don't think they do. I'm sure they're keeping an eye on you.
Okay, what does that mean? And what makes him so sure? And is it weird that he tried to schedule our next interview in Istanbul?
That's pretty good. And any opportunity that someone has to put someone in power on the spot for policies, horrible policies, or policies that they haven't fulfilled, good for them.
Respect.
Yep. All right. Lastly, we have this. As you know, Hurricane Dorian, and I don't even think we have really any sense of the scope of the destruction in the Bahamas. I mean, it's massive. I think there are parts of the Bahamas that simply don't exist anymore in any meaningful way. They've been so overrun, and the video is very difficult. Well, here's Ben Shapiro, who is a critic of Donald Trump's. He just calls him as he sees it, and of course he's trying to. There was a suggestion by Donald Trump that perhaps maybe we should drop a nuke to blow the hurricane apart.
Just spitball.
And, here's the thing with nuclear weapons or nukes of any kind. When they explode, they spread this thing called radiation. And the tough thing about these sort of radioactive, is it isotopes or this material? They don't have that whole thing with fruit flies? Where they all had like a half-life. They would all die, like they go through their whole life cycle in what is it, like an hour and a half or something like that. It's the opposite with radioactive material.
Tiny myth.
It takes a long time. And when you have an explosion, things fly out in all sorts of different directions. And then when you have an explosion near a massive weather storm, it's also, there's going to be a lot of flinging. Ben Shapiro's not worried about that.
They're talking about this dumb story that President Trump wanted to nuke hurricanes, which, by the way, I don't even care whether it does anything. It just sounds cool. I mean, what if there are sharks in the hurricanes? What if it's a Sharknado? What then, guys? Have you thought about that? Just the idea. Anytime you're talking about nuking a random thing that's not really going to hurt anybody, I'll admit, the 13-year-old boy in me is kind of for it. In any case, it's a dumb story. CNN decided to make it a big story, and then they brought on April Ryan, who is supposedly a reporter.
This is funny.
This is he's trying, this is what they'll do, right? They will make fun of the thing that is so ridiculous to diminish the insanity of it.
It's metacritical.
His party fully supports a chief executive of this country who wants to blow up a hurricane with nuclear weapons. Is that a dumb story? Is that something that Americans shouldn't be aware of? This is, incidentally, I would also add, after the U.S. government called for a program to start allowing nukes in outer space. There's clearly at the top of our government a lack of awareness about the capacity for nuclear weapons or nuclear materials to harm thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And he's poo-pooing. It's stupid. This is a media critique. piece that he's doing here.
Well, I mean, if you nuked a hurricane and presumably that radiation got into the ocean, maybe like washed ashore or something like that, you don't think people are just going to sell their house?
Okay, so stipulate the entirety of the oceans become liquefied with the rain of nuclear acid. Okay, then you would just move. You just flip your beachfront property.
Now, I'm surprised this is still there, but at the National Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological, or I should say the Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Laboratory, as part of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, there's a hurricane research division, and they have frequently asked questions. And one of those frequently asked questions, I've just IM'd it to you, Matt, is why don't we try to destroy tropical cyclones by nuking them?
Is that serious?
During each hurricane season, there always appears a suggestion that one should simply use nuclear weapons to try and destroy the storms.
I mean, we got them.
Apart from the fact that this might not even alter the storm, this approach neglects the problem that released radioactive fallout would fairly quickly move with the trade winds to affect land areas and cause devastating environmental problems. Needless to say, this is not a good idea.
That's what I'm saying. Just move. Just sell your house.
Now, that's just the first paragraph. And then they go on to say, now for a more rigorous scientific explanation, in other words, we've just given you the idiot version. The main difficulty with using explosive to modify hurricanes is the amount of energy required. So in other words, even a nuclear weapon doesn't have the power of these storms.
What about like an H-bomb?
But here's the point.
Melted a lot of Japanese
This is
people.
indicative of a president and an administration and a party that completely neglects science, where you have a president who is somehow getting his information from complete whack jobs. Whack jobs. And maybe we dodged this bullet, but we don't know if we'll dodge the next. And this is just a ridiculous story. It tells us nothing about the current state of affairs.
Trump derangement syndrome at it again.
Yep. If Barack Obama wanted to nuke something, we'd probably have done it by now. Calling by 201 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 201. 201 once.
Hey, Sam. It's Hey, can you hear me?
Yep. Who's this?
Hey, it's Alex from Jersey City.
Hey, what's on your mind?
First of all, I just wanted to thank you guys for helping me commit wage theft every single day.
You're welcome.
And I wanted to talk to you guys. I wanted to ask. I don't know if I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but if Bernie was to win, and this kind of goes back to what Michael was talking about how it's not really about policy, it's more about movement with Bernie in order to get things done. I wanted to get your take on what you guys would envision if Sanders did get elected president. Would he be able to pass a lot of the things that he's been proposing?
Well, who controls the Senate in your scenario?
I would say that if Bernie wins, I would have a feeling that, maybe.
Right.
Like, let's say we get full control of the Senate and the House.
I think.
Because
I think some of his agenda. If you have the Senate, I think that you will get some of his agenda. The House will be fully behind him. The Senate is going to be very tricky. Joe Manchin is going to be the most important guy in Joe Manchin. What's his name in Arizona, and Sinema in Arizona, and presumably if I can't remember his name. Gabby Gifford's husband. Yeah, the former astronaut. Those three will be very important players. Depending on who's in Colorado. If it's Hickenlooper, Hickenlooper's going to put himself right in the middle of that stuff too, as opposed to I think Romanoff would be on board. It depends on who those senators are, but we're going to get. But we will have progress. We will move towards something. And Bernie might be able to go into a state like a Colorado, let's say, and actually influence the senator there. And I think he'd be much more aggressive about doing it than Obama was. Obama could have gone to Connecticut and said, Joe Lieberman does not want you to buy into Medicare at 55. Which was floating around for a while, and then he pulled out of it. Or he could have gone and headed to where Conrad was, Ken Conrad, and said, he's standing in front of you getting a public option here. So I think he's going to get some. I don't think he's going to get all, but that doesn't mean that 4 years later or 8 years later we won't get that. We have a much better chance of getting it. Appreciate the call.
Thanks.
One more call, I think should do it. Calling from a 774 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Corey from Worcester calling back again.
Corey from Worcester. What's on your mind, Corey?
How's it going? So I kind of wanted to expand on the quick point that I was trying to make on the last little 35-second call. I appreciate that extra 5 seconds, by the way.
You're welcome.
But so I recently watched a Philosophy Tube video about climate grief. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. But it was really interesting in the way that the Christchurch killer and the recent El Paso shootings, their manifesto both had elements of, very deep concerns about the climate change situation, and that was one of their contentions in, the acts of violence, because, people do have access to the information that Bernie has put out about, Pentagon report saying that, the increase in global temperatures, increases terrorism, and this is kind of like a byproduct of that, right? Like those ideologies, ironically enough, have led to more terrorism. And terrorism over the idea of that, which is even more bizarre to me, but that kind of makes sense. But there's a lot of things that need to be addressed in all of these categories. But as I was trying to get at, because I feel like it gets skirted over a lot, and the narrative isn't really covered very well about the correlation between, as you had mentioned, they don't like to, titrate off of certain meds, and it can be dangerous, especially with antipsychotics and SSRIs. But sometimes, say somebody couldn't get their prescription filled, or they missed a dose and they had a adverse reaction to that because they needed it to maintain. And then that is the moment that they snap and decide to take all of these ideologies, that certain obvious organizations that like to dog whistle and to fearmonger and, pit us against one another. Sometimes that results actually 90% of the time since Columbine. What almost every major mass shooting in America has had in common was that they were on some form of antidepressant or antipsychotic medication. And beside of the just side effects from taking the meds in general, I work in pharmaceuticals actually, and it really kills me to see the overprescribing of, dangerous medications like opioids. But I don't think that certain, antidepressants which get overly prescribed when they're addressing symptoms that might not even correlate to what's actually going on with a person. It's just a really dangerous game we're playing. And there's so many studies that have been published about the connections between gun violence and prescription.
Well, I appreciate the comments. I definitely think that we need more rigor in the way that we deal with these drugs. I definitely think we do. Which is not to say that they're not the the amount of suffering and misery that they have alleviated is huge. But I think there needs to be more.
There are people who need to be on.
Yes, I think there needs to be more rigor in the way that these things are sold, and part of it is because, I mean, frankly, it's because of profiteering. I mean, it's not. It's not the same.
As Bernie has called out many times recently.
It's not the same, but we saw it in the context of the opioids. And, that is just a lot more explicit, obviously. And now there's hopefully some reckoning and accounting for that. But, what you're talking about is a tougher dynamic to sort of see in the way that we can see it with opioids.
It's very multi-layered for sure. It's just funny because sometimes I'll click on one of your videos and I'll see like I'll get a Trintellix ad like, all these symptoms of your depression. I'm like, okay, so this is, that's part of the problem, obviously, encouraging people to think that, get a hypochondriac kind of mentality about, maybe I do need that. Maybe I should go see a doctor and have him prescribe me this.
Right. But
again, that's a whole part of the culture, It's very hard to break that up without, great change and being able to break up some of these drug companies that, it's part of their profit margin, and I understand that, but I'm also disgusted by it because I see, in deeper ways, how they price gouge, and, it goes from premiums to copays to deductibles to gaps in coverage to catastrophic coverage to the point where people who are on a fixed budget that are older, who have more ailments about them, they can't afford anything.
Yep.
They can't afford food.
All right, Corey.
You have to trade.
I got to jump. I appreciate the call. Thanks. Good point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Worcester in the house. They had a lot of Massachusetts representatives. All right, look, I got 5 callers on the line. I'm going to just give you 30 seconds each. I'm sorry, we've run out of time, but I'm going to do this again. Calling from a 605 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 30 seconds.
Hey, this is Malik from Minnesota. Since I only got 30 seconds, there's a big protest of unionized security workers in Minnesota that have been locked out of a nuclear plant here, so it's a big labor deal, certainly during Labor Day week. But thanks, guys.
All right, we'll check it out. Thanks, Malik. Appreciate the call. Calling from a 503 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Joe in LA. How are you guys doing?
Good, Joe. You got 30 seconds.
Okay, love you guys. I'm a proud Fuck Mike Cernovich member of your show. Just wanted to let you know that there's a great podcast called Citations Needed, which is about, just examining bullshit and stuff through U.S. media. They had a great episode about fact-checking the fact-checkers and stuff. Everyone who listens to the show should check it out. Left is best, bend the knee, Lula Libre, Baba Booey.
Right.
Give me a shofar.
All right, you got it. That's good. Calling from a 404 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Christian from Atlanta.
Christian, you got 30 seconds. Go.
Sam, I'm really disappointed. You've called out the people like Dave Rubin for debates, but I haven't heard you say anything about your call out from Creationist Cat. It's been a month. Really hope you're not a hypocrite when it comes to debating anyone and all challengers. So wondering if we'll hear anything from you about that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your phone is breaking up. I got to let you go. I'm not afraid of Creationist Cat. I'll go head to head with that cat soon. I didn't realize I was challenged to a debate by them, but I will definitely. I'm not afraid. Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You got 30 seconds. Go.
Hi, this is Ed from Manhattan.
Ed, 30 seconds. Go.
Phenomenal. All right, I want to talk about the fact that politicians should actually earn votes from their voters as opposed to the moral position that people should intrinsically try to fight the greater good kind of situation or choose the lesser evil. This has to do with the thing that you're talking about, the psychology, the harm that it causes a voter to go ahead and vote against their interest, especially if they believe that there's going to be no meaningful change if you select from politicians who are chosen for you. Whew.
Okay. I appreciate that, Ed. Thanks for the call. Calling from an 850 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Alex Chi from Florida.
Alex, you got 30 seconds. Go.
Sure. Hey, I love the AM quickie, so I'll keep this super quick in the spirit of that. I just wanted to note, so conservatives talk a lot about how confiscating guns is a tyranny, but what I see as a tyranny is the idea that what we would decide to do democratically, like, they can't accept that. They have, like, their ideas, it seems like they want to organize death squads and, like, go after us if we take away the guns, and that seems like utterly fucking... I don't know if I can curse. Utterly ridiculous, and that's the real tyranny. It's a threat against our civil society for whatever we do. One more quickie, Sam. I just want to shout out my local DSA. We're organizing a chapter. This is Pensacola, Florida. Guys, if you're in the area, please meet us on September 19th, 7 p.m. at Open Book, Steps from the Industrially Ravaged Bio-Tahar. Lula Libre, Solidarity Forever. Thank you, Sam.
Good job. Thanks. Calling from a 575 area code. You got 30 seconds, and we've got 4 or 5 more calls we're going to get to.
Hey, this is Cade. I'm a student from the technologically ravaged Silicon Valley.
And you got 30 seconds. Go.
And I just wanted to underline, the extreme cruelty of the medical debt system from, a kid's perspective. I grew up poor. Dad worked construction, so he's the one who got the insurance. Mom got sick, and now we go $150K in debt. The only way you get out of that, from a kid's perspective, is a college being nice enough to give you a ton of money to get out of there. And annually, millions of lives are being ruined for the benefit of Kaiser Permanente and Blue Cross in the richest country in the history. Bad luck shouldn't ruin your life. Thank you very much, Sam.
Very well said. Great call. Great call. Calling from a 210 area code. You got 30 seconds. Go.
Hey, Cody from San Antonio. I wanted to ask the MR crew real quick. When y'all were listening to the Four Stooges at the Straight Pride Parade yesterday, do y'all recall when that guy said "Clown World"?
Yeah, something to that effect. What was that about?
I just wanted to let you guys know he's doing some blatantly racist anti-Semitic signaling. That's been a right-wing meme that's been around. It started out on Reddit. There's been a bunch of subreddits that have been banned for it. Also on 8chan as well. But anyways, they're trying to say that Zionists are running the world, and they're trying to refer to them as clowns. You hear a lot of Hong Kong shit. I heard it on that guy who was the guy who was with James O'Keefe, and then he read it on YouTube or whatever. He's also one of those guys. He's saying "Clown World." He said it on Alex Jones and stuff. So just want to let y'all know, whenever they're saying that, they are doing some very anti-Semitic signaling. They're racist piece of shit. So thank you. Have a great day.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks, Cody.
It's meant to be like a nihilist Pepe, which, I mean, seems redundant. But
Calling from a 928 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from? We got 3 more calls.
My
we're
name
gonna
is
take.
Brian.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep. You got 30 seconds.
Brian from Flagstaff.
Brian from Flagstaff.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you got 30 seconds. Go.
Yeah. Finally got through. Hey, the left and right is just the north and south of the Civil War. I don't know why anybody's not cluing in on that. And I'm afraid to give up my guns because they're all collecting their guns down there and shooting up people.
Yeah, I could understand that. I'd be a little bit worried too if my neighbors were all armed to the teeth. Sometimes you don't have any choice in that situation, and that's why we need some type of gun control so that people don't even have to make that choice. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, bye.
2 more. Calling from a 303 area code. Who's this?
Real quick and see if...
Good. 303.
Hello.
Sorry. Go ahead. You got 30 seconds. Who's this?
This is Brittany from Denver.
Okay, Brittany.
And I just wanted to... I was just calling in to see if ASAP Sammy ever checked out that new Tyler, the Creator album.
I'm still working on that. Got that right on my list right here, Tyler, the Creator. I'm going right after that.
You guys should all check it out. It's an amazing album.
I'll check it
but
out.
I also wanted to say I'm a big Bernie supporter, and I have had a lot of people asking me about him lately, so that's really exciting.
We shall see. That's good news. Appreciate the call, Brittany.
Bye. Thanks.
Tyler, the Creator. Okay, we got 2 more calls. Calling from a 442 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 442. 442 going once. Oh, go ahead.
Is this me?
Yeah. All right. Well, where are you calling from?
This is Lisa. I'm calling from the UK.
Lisa, what's on your mind? You got 30 seconds.
Just why the Tories are so into Brexit. I think the reason is because the EU are phasing in some tax avoidance laws that will make it a lot harder for the very rich to basically not pay taxes.
Interesting.
And I think that's a big reason.
All right, got to jump. Thank you. Appreciate the call. That's interesting. All right, final call of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Calling from a 708 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
My name is Yusuf. I'm actually, my origins is unknown because my country has been wiped off the map. And I just wanted to say, as somebody that's been on the other side of receiving military weapons, that I think that the left media is complicit with the military-industrial complex because they don't bring in any victims of any sort of any war at all. Because I know when American people see something wrong and with their own eyes or they hear it, they stand up and fight against it. And since the left does not bring any victims of any wars at all for the American people to see it, the military-industrial complex can keep going and thriving.
What country were you from?
Palestine.
Okay.
Wiped off the map, not even on the map no more. But I think that if the American people see and hear the stories of what's happening overseas, so many people's life would be spared. But since we're not talking about it, it's all good and dandy.
Yeah,
and
I think there's some truth there.
And I'm sorry, one more thing. I saw that your co-host Mike, he attacks Jimmy Dore for a lot of stuff, but Jimmy Dore, he is telling the truth about a lot of stuff that's happening. But in our political situation, we have to compromise because not even half, I would say 80% of the Democratic Party is super corrupt, and we have to just look away because our preferred politicians are not corrupt at all, and it's hard for us to call them out because our politicians want to be very Joseph.
Listen, here's the problem with Jimmy Dore, right? Because
he has no point. He has no goal. I understand.
No, it's not just that. It's that when he says something that you agree with, he also says something to the effect of like, Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's. I can tell because I'm watching her stumble. And then what it does, Joseph, is it makes your point or his point dubious. Because the whole point of having a platform is that you are supposed to be rigorous with what you put out there, even if it's opinions. And if he's going out there saying that he can diagnose that Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's or that Seth Rich, there's all red flaggy around him being assassinated by the Clintons. Or the Democrats have the ability to filibuster when there's no filibuster. Or on and on and on. It starts to question all the other statements he makes, and it undercuts his credibility. But everything else he had to say, I agree with. Appreciate the call. Got to jump. That was it. Nope, I'm done. I'm literally we're literally doing a second show right now as I'm recording, as they just got dialed in. Folks, we're out of time. We'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and